We're respecting your time here as you give us an hour after school and what we know has been a very busy day for you and a very busy time in education kind of across the board. Our webinar today is on the graphing calculator, which is what we embed for the grade 8 EOG and also all of our high school EOCs. My name is Beth Nash. I am the test measurement specialist here at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and I'm responsible for middle school and high school math and science. Before we get to the main event today, we do have a few kind of frequently asked questions that we would like to go over with you. First, everyone is muted due to the size of the webinar. We're expecting about 300 people today. We will be recording the webinar and we'll be posting it to our website. Also, tomorrow, anyone who registered, so whether they logged in today live or not, anyone who registered will be receiving an email, and that email won't come from me and it won't come from WebEx. It'll come from NC Public Schools. We're having to use a new platform to send out the recordings due to the size of how many folks have registered. So look for an email tomorrow from NC Public Schools, and that will have a link to the recording as well as all of the links that Nolan shares with us today. And it will also have contact information for me or Nolan if you need to get in touch with us after the fact. You'll be able to share that recording with others. You can go back and rewatch it yourself, or it might be something that a colleague wasn't able to join us, or maybe it's something you would like to spend some time on with your PLT, and you'll be able to freely share that recording with others. Today's featured calculator is found at this bit.ly. Keep in mind that bit.ly is a little bit picky about capital letters. You will have to enter it in precisely that way. Links to the agenda and the slides can be found at those two bit.lys there. And once I turn presenting privileges over to Nolan, I'll be dropping those in the chat so that you can just click on them and get straight there. And again, I'll be also sending those out tomorrow in the email. And the last note is that NCDPI cannot offer any CEUs for the webinar today, and that's either for logging in live or watching the recording after the fact. We have a couple requests of you. We do have two different modes of communication on this afternoon. We have the Q&A on, and we also have the chat on. The chat is where I will drop those links that are of benefit to the whole group. We are also asking if you're having technical difficulties, if you can see but you don't have any audio, if you've got a colleague at work who registered but for whatever reason they can't get in today, any of those tech support concerns, if you would please send a private chat to Stephanie Boyd. Stephanie is with us behind the scenes today, and she is going to handle all of those tech support concerns. She is a master at this, so if you need help with anything technical related, please send a private chat to her. If you have questions regarding the content of the presentation today, if you need something repeated, if you see something that Nolan is sharing and you're not sure if it would work for this or that, any kind of content related questions, please drop those in the Q&A. The reason we ask for the Q&A is that it allows us to kind of sort and keep track. And questions that are really easy, I can just click on them and I can send you a reply. But it also helps me to kind of organize them. What we'll be doing is Nolan will be stopping periodically through the presentation today, and we'll be taking questions. And then he'll also save a few minutes at the end that we can circle back. But this is for you. We want to make sure you're getting as much out of it as you can, and we welcome your questions. All right, with us today, we have Nolan Doyle. Nolan, this is the third time he has been with us in 2 weeks. And I have to tell you, the first two webinars, we did one for elementary schools and one for middle schools. They were phenomenal webinars. And so I am confident that you will get a tremendous amount of information out of this today. And we're so excited that we have Nolan here with us. I've previewed the agenda for today, and it looks every bit as fabulous as the agenda for the past two have been. And with that, Nolan, I'm going to pass you the virtual baton here. All right, sir.
Thank you so much, Beth. I'm excited to be here. As Beth said, I've already worked with some elementary teachers in North Carolina and middle school. Now with high school, I'm definitely excited that you all are my people. I am a high school teacher as well, so definitely in more of my comfort zone with this session. But thank you all for joining us. It's been a full day for all of us as educators, right? So to be here trying to improve and gain some more knowledge and become better teachers and educators, your students or the teachers you work with are definitely going to benefit. So thank you all for being here. Just a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I am a classroom teacher in Chesterfield County, Virginia, just outside of Richmond, Virginia. I'm also a Desmos Teaching Fellow and then worked towards becoming a Desmos Certified Presenter back in 2017. So been using Desmos for quite a while. And what I'm going to try to provide in this presentation is not only all the wonderful things I've learned from the Desmos team, but also incorporate some of my own personal experiences, whether it's those experiences in the classroom with my students, or if it's those experiences working with teachers in Virginia and really all over the country as they learn how to use the Desmos tools. So our agenda, Beth is dropping that in that bit.ly in the chat as well as it's displayed throughout this presentation. So you can see the agenda, you can see all the links that I'll be kind of referencing and providing you with today. But we'll do some introductions. We'll jump into the graphing calculator and really just kind of focus mainly on how to access the specific version for North Carolina. And then we'll get to my favorite part, actually doing some math. So you will experience a Desmos activity from the student perspective, and then I'll jump in as the teacher and kind of model how you use the amazing teacher dashboard to best utilize these activities. And then we'll have a little bit of time just to get a little preview of how to actually maybe edit the activities that are already there or build from scratch, build your own. That's going to be kind of monitoring that Q&A throughout. I'll check in with her if there's anything that she hasn't been able to answer that I can jump in and answer. And there'll be a little bit of time at the end to get any questions you have answered. So that's a lot of stuff especially for 1 hour. So I just want to be clear what the learning goal is not. You're not going to leave here as a Desmos expert. Recently did a full day professional development where we spent 2 hours just on the calculator, 2 hours just on facilitating or running activities, and 2 hours on building, and it still wasn't enough to really kind of dig in, I think, at your own pace. So what I want to focus on today is more what can Desmos do? And then what next? We're not going to necessarily have time to know how to do all the things, or you're not going to be able to click all the things at your own pace. But I'll give you that big overview of what is possible and what Desmos, these tools, how they can best be utilized for instruction and for student learning, and then give you some links for what's next, right? So then when you want to learn more of the how-to and you want to work at your own pace and work with other teachers and support them, you've got those resources to support you as you continue to learn and grow. A little bit about Desmos, the company. Desmos believes that all students are brilliant, and our jobs as teachers is to tap into that brilliance to help students learn math. And so you just keep that in the back of your head as we see some of these tools. And that's the goal when Desmos is designing these tools, is how do we put student thinking and their brilliance at the center of our instruction. Desmos is all about accessibility. So one of the big things I just want you all to know is that everything we see today is free. There is a 6th through 8 curriculum that can be purchased, but all the tools we're using are free and will always remain free. The Desmos company is also guided by specific equity principles and pedagogical philosophy, which with our short limited time we will not get into today, but invite you to learn more about those on the website. So thinking about the Desmos tools, this is kind of in my head. I like to keep things straight where we've got the calculators at desmos.com, and then we're going to dig into those activities where as a teacher, you're going to access those and set them up and run them or create your own at teacher.desmos.com, which we'll explore later on. The students will access those activities that you set up for them at student.desmos.com. And there's several ways to set those up for your students. So let's take a little bit of time to make clear how to access that graphing calculator. The general public-facing version can be found at desmos.com. So I'm going to head there now. And so when you open up the tab under Math Tools, you'll see all the calculator tools that are available, and there's the graphing calculator. But what I would like to focus on is the specific version for North Carolina. So there's a couple ways to get there. You could go to test practice, but for me, I'm going to go to resources. And I've also provided these direct links in the bit.ly, that agenda, which I'll reference in just a minute. But under resources, if we go to assessments, and we'll scroll down and find our map and click on North Carolina. And so here's where we can quickly access the graphing calculator that is specific to North Carolina. And when you click on that, you'll notice at the top it's green. It says North Carolina. It says NCTest version, which is different than if you had gone to the general calculator where it's black. You're allowed to log in. You'll be able to save graphs and things like that. And I provided this link, like I mentioned, in our agenda. So the general graphing calculator is linked there. The one I just clicked on specific to North Carolina is this third link. And this link will actually take you back to what we were looking at here. And we can click on this PDF to get a clear understanding of what those differences are on the North Carolina version. So it looks like a lot, but several of these are really kind of helpful, like the default angle mode being 2 degrees instead of radians for our geometry students. So just to kind of run through those and see what these differences are. If I look in the testing version versus the full version, under this plus sign in the full version, I can add an image to my screen. I'm going to maybe graph on top of it. Okay, you won't be able to do that in the North Carolina version. So if you're doing something in class where you want students interacting with it, you'll want to use the full version. If you're practicing more for test taking and things like that, you'll notice you don't have as many options there as far as the image, as far as folders, and notes. And so notes is just where you could add some text, directions, or notes for it's not reading it as math type. The other difference is when I click on the on-screen keypad, so I've got, my numbers and operations, I've got different functions here. I've also got a new alphabetical keypad, and so this is what you would find on a computer, the QWERTY keyboard, but in the North Carolina version, that will be alphabetical. So that is one other difference. We mentioned the degrees, so in the wrench, that's where you can toggle back and forth between radians and degrees. It was already in degrees, so if we're using those trig functions, we should be all set for our geometry students. Whereas the default in the general public-facing version is radians. There are a few advanced trig functions. So you can see all the options in the full version here, and stats. So these different menus or tabs here is full of functions. Whereas if I go to the North Carolina version, there are going to be a few that are removed. You can see the trig functions are not all full here. There's a couple stats ones that are missing. Those should not affect too much those students that are testing with the calculator though. So those are some of the differences that you'll see with the graphing calculator. And before I kind of pause, just to see if there's any questions as far as accessing it or what those differences are, just want to point out that for me, what's been really transformational is not necessarily my students using this calculator to just test or do calculations, but it's really in the instruction piece. So just a couple things that I want to highlight that I love about this calculator is the first is that every representation is on one screen. So as I add points, I'm just typing in a point and I'm getting it to plot. Or maybe I want to add a table and plot points that way. And I'm not having to navigate a bunch of different menus. I'm just putting everything over here in this expression list and it's populating on the graph as I'm typing it. Every keystroke it's updating. I could put in an equation as well. And that equation doesn't necessarily have to be y equals. So the ease of use, and again, that idea of seeing all the representations on one screen, numerical values of points, the equation, the algebraic, I apologize. But then the graph that's there as well.
For you, Sandy, the DP, please go to parent pickup, nation mother.
I apologize. But those multiple representations on one screen, I think, is huge for students making connections. And one of the things that really sold me on using Desmos in my classroom, it was probably 7 or 8 years ago, well before Virginia had adopted it on their end of course testing, were sliders. So I just want to give you a little preview of that and then leave you with some resources to explore the calculator more. But if I type in y equals mx plus b, so instead of putting numbers for the slope or for the y-intercept, it's going to prompt me to add sliders. I'm just going to hit all. And now I can quickly slide the value for m and see how that graph, that line changes. And so in 10 seconds, I created this really, really powerful tool and visual that's not a static graph, it's dynamic. And I can just throw this up and I can open up a class period to my students and say, well, what do you notice? What do you wonder? And then I'm going to invite that informal language that they can bring to the table here. They don't necessarily have to know anything about slope, but they could maybe start talking about the direction of the line. Maybe they start talking about the steepness of the line. And maybe not in that formal language, but we can slowly move them towards, in our discussions, using the language and the notation that we want. We could do it with the y-intercept. Just tell me, what do you see? Love asking those low floor, high ceiling questions where maybe they'll use some formal language, maybe they won't, but everyone can tell me what they see. They see the line moving. How do they see it moving? Maybe they see it going up and down. Maybe they see it going left and right. Sometimes that depends on how steep it is. Maybe it appears to be shifting a different way. But we can also pause and quickly get some values just by clicking and start to connect the graphical, the numerical, the algebraic representations. This value matches this. Does it still match when they move it down here? Yep. And we can get quickly, with the technology, get a bunch of examples. And we can start to look for patterns and make those connections together as a class in a discussion, which is much more powerful, right, than us just saying, okay, today we're going to learn about slope-intercept form. This is the slope, this is the y-intercept, this is what it is. So students are kind of discovering and playing with that on their own. So big takeaways right now as far as the graphing calculator, being able to access the North Carolina version, what students will have on their test, but also understanding, hey, this can be a really powerful instructional tool as well. So I'm just going to check in with Beth to see if anything's come up in the chat that we want to address before we move on.
Thank you. We do have one. So in what you're doing here, is the calculator always available in these activities, or are you having to allow students access?
So right now we are not in activity. This is just going to these websites. So the students can get to these. You could share this specific link to your students depending on how you have it set up in your classroom, and they could access this at any point. The activities we'll get to, we're going to actually set up for them, and there'll be a class code, and that's what we're going to jump into in just a second. But yeah, these calculators, they can access at any time. The other nice thing is if they open this, the calculator, which obviously you have to be connected to the internet for that. But if they were to keep this tab open and go somewhere where they are not connected to the internet, they still will be able to use the full calculator. So that's been helpful. A lot of my students, they all have Chromebooks, but if they go home and they don't have internet connection, or they're somewhere where they don't have access to the internet, as long as they already open that tab, they could open up their Chromebook and still be able to use the graphing calculator.
All right, I think that is it for us now. The others I have been able to answer.
Awesome.
Oh, actually, nope, one just came in.
Sure.
Can you show again from the main Desmos page how to get to the North Carolina version?
Sure. So I will mention again, it is in this link here for the agenda, but when you're at desmos.com, to me, the easiest way is to go to resources and assessments, and then find North Carolina. So desmos.com, resources, assessments, and then find North Carolina, and you'll have the link there. All right.
All right, I think we are good to go, sir.
Awesome. So what I'm going to have you all do, and I'll drop this link in. You can go to student.desmos.com and enter in this class code. You can also click on this link that I believe I just got into the chat. It will save you one step. It'll enter the code in for you, but you're going to jump into an activity. So we'll get a feel for what an activity is. So I've already set this up as the teacher. You all are like my students now. I'm sharing my class code with you all. This is how you would access it as a student. And I've got you paced to just one screen. So you're going to jump in and you're going to be on screen 2. And I want you to just play around and explore that screen for just a minute or two as everyone's getting logged in. Let us know if you have any issues. But just play around with that screen. Smash that try it button. See what happens. See if it's what you expected to happen. Maybe change some values, change some symbols around, and continue to play and figure out what's going on with Shearer the sheep on this screen. All right, so that link's in the chat. If you're joining us today from somewhere where you can't really, maybe you're on your phone and it's not the best device to jump into this activity, you can continue to watch my screen. I'm going to come back and explain more detail, kind of what I'm doing on my end, but you can just kind of watch that teacher perspective as we go through. I'll just give you about 1 more minute to explore screen 2, and you won't be able to navigate anywhere else. All right, I'm going to pause you in about 10 seconds to kind of wrap up what you're on. All right, so I've paused you. I'm going to have you bring your attention back to my screen. And so what you're looking at here is the teacher dashboard. So I gave you all your class code. You jumped in as students. And this is what I'm looking at as Student Center. So there's a few views that I'll go over right now. I'm currently in the summary view. So this gives me an overview of all the students who have entered in. I can see their names. I can see what screens they're on right now. They have to be on screen 2 because I've made use of our pacing button. So there's a few tools over here, classroom conversation tools, that I can use to kind of guide how we're going to go through this activity. So with the pacing, I could pace one screen at a time, and we could kind of do this activity together. We could just do the first screen. We could all move to the second one. We could all move to the third one, fourth one, and just keep going. I could also do a range and say, okay, I want all of you to work on screens 4 through 6. Give some time for students to work at their own pace. Or I could take the pacing off altogether and just let students work at their own pace through the entire thing. It could be during class. It could be outside of class, whatever that might be, how I'm using the activity. So the pacing's really helpful in how I'm going to chunk this activity, especially as we get, if you're using maybe a longer activity. The pause button, as you saw, I was able to kind of direct everyone's attention back to me. So maybe we're going to work for a little bit. I want you all pause. That's your signal that, hey, we're going to have some discussion as a class. The other thing I like is the anonymize button. So right now, as I'm monitoring students, I'm maybe seeing if there were multiple slide students we're working on, who's lagging behind, who might need some help, or who's maybe going a little too quickly, needs to revisit some of those earlier slides. But I might also want to collect student work and display it. And so once I'm displaying student work, I can hit that anonymize button. So if I'm projecting in front of a class, these are now mathematicians' names, and you can see yours in the upper left-hand corner. So you kind of know who yours is. But when I display student work, no one's worried about, okay, who was wrong, who was right. No one needs to feel embarrassed. We can focus on the math and the conversations we're going to have about the math. The teacher view, so that's when I can really dig into the responses. So if I click on a screen or I click that tab for teacher view, I can see everyone's screen. I can see what everyone's kind of entering in and exploring on this one. I hadn't seen this one. We were trying to see what would happen. Wonder if we do something like this, and we actually ended up getting an error message, equation or inequality for X. So I think it had to be a single inequality there. But I can kind of see what students are doing, start to see their responses in that teacher view. And I can also go to student view. So this is what students see. So I might actually start the activity paused, and we look at this screen together. So I display this with my student view here, and I just show the class, hey, when we try it, let's see what happens. And then we might try a few together. Just ask them, is that what you expected or not? And then give them some time to play and come back to discuss, right? So after 2 or 3 minutes of playing, we come back and, have them share some interesting ones that they tried. Did they try? I saw a lot of you trying, right, around 10, right? So when we do greater than or equal to 10, what happens? Shira is not happy. So just kind of playing around, less than 10. We see what happens. And then here's where I love this idea of including or not including. So as students are playing, we start to have this really cool discussion about how do we get that one blade of grass? How do we include the blade of grass at 10? And all of a sudden that context becomes an anchor to come back to later. So a week from now, 2 weeks from now, when we start talking about remembering including or not including, open circles, closed circles with inequalities, we can say, hey, remember Shira the sheep? Remember when we wanted Shira to get that blade of grass? What did we have to have when we wanted to include it? So I love the context in this for students. I love the idea that students are able to just play and they get what we can call interpretive feedback instead of evaluative feedback. There's no right or wrong here. It's just we're going to put some things in. We're going to put some math, some algebraic representations into the technology, and it's going to interpret what that is with this really cool animation and visual. It's not evaluating saying, hey, you're right or you're wrong, but it's really going to push student thinking forward as they try different things. And we can get all those examples, lots of different ones over and over and over, that repetition and that trial and error. So that idea can really hit home with students. So also while I'm in this student view or any of my views, I have these teacher moves that are going to recommend maybe how I go through this. So like I mentioned, it might recommend me to start this activity paused, right? Give 2 or 3 minutes for students to play. So this is really helpful in planning your activity because this is a really new way to teach and it's kind of hard to plan for at first, but these teacher moves and suggestions are super helpful as you get ready to implement some of these activities that Desmos has made for you. All right, so I'm actually I had paused you. I'm gonna open up now screens 2, 3, and 4. And I'm gonna unpause you and just let you work through screens 3 and 4 for just another minute or two, not too long, but just to get a feel for a couple more of the slides of what the Desmos activity is gonna provide students, and then come back in and wrap up that teacher perspective, some of the teacher moves we can make use of. So again, you've been exploring on screen 2, jump over to screen 3, playing around with that, and then wrap up with screen 4, and we'll come back together in just about a minute or two.
Nolan, are you game to try a couple questions that I'm not sure about, and honestly, I don't know if you're going to know either. Okay, so we have a couple questions along a similar vein of so when we navigate to the version that North Carolina embeds, it is somewhat of a limited version
Correct.
in that, features are turned off. So we have one question of, is it possible, so the way that it formats there, is it possible to act without going to the North Carolina and, heading to our kind of our personal page there? Is it possible to see a version that is more like the embedded one on the test? And the idea here is that when it's embedded within the app, the kind of the graph is above, and then where the kids can enter the information is underneath it, as opposed to the web version where you're entering in information on the left and you are graphing on the right. Are you aware of a way to kind of switch the orientation?
Now I know in Virginia we can resize it. And so if students resize it, it ends up moving where you enter in the expression list to the left, to side by side. So I'm not sure if without knowing what exactly that app looks like for you all, I'm not sure if that would be the same thing, but I know.
All right, I have some folks chiming in that they have done that. So hopefully that answers one of our questions.
Yeah, so like in
Thank you.
the app, yeah, you should be able to resize it, and then as it gets bigger, if the student makes it bigger, it should look more than like this side by side.
Okay, awesome. All right, we got one more. So, and I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to double check with you. If we go to the NC version of what we embed, students are still going to be able, like say for example, they're on their Chromebooks, they've got that open in one tab. There's nothing that's going to stop them from being able to maybe navigate and do a Google search on another tab.
Correct. You would need to have something else to help with that. Now there is an app for like tablets and phones. There's a testing version that will lock it into that, and then it will when students exit, it will say how long they've been in that app. So there is a testing version app if they were going to use it on a phone, and there might be one in the Chrome. I have to look. There might be an app in Chrome that is the same thing. I'll have to.
I know when I was in the classroom, I know it. So for those who aren't familiar with what he's talking about, it's a separate download. It's not within the Desmos app. It's a separate download from the App Store. Still free, still built by Desmos. I will caution you for one thing. It's called something like Desmos testing or something like that. I will caution folks that want to try that as a way to prevent kids from, doing Google searches in the background. It is Desmos testing. It is not North Carolina Desmos testing.
Correct.
So it is a slightly different functionality, but that is an option I had forgotten about, Nolan.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, with the Virginia one, there's similar differences. It's not exactly the same, but most of my kids, we use the full face version, and the differences aren't that big, so it really doesn't end up being too much of an issue. But definitely be aware of that is not the exact North Carolina version.
All right, and we've caught up on all of our questions, so I will let you get back to your activity.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm not going to pause you, but I am going to maybe direct your attention back to me. If you want to keep playing around with those screens, that's fine. But I want to kind of wrap up the dashboard. See a little bit more of the summary view at this point. You can see now some of you are on different screens, so that's kind of, you can see how it's highlighted of which student is on which screen. We had one where there was an actual correct answer, so we can see where the check marks are. That gives you a quick overview of where everyone is in that summary view. And then in the teacher view, I love being able, so like screen 4, now we're really getting into some student thinking, right? So in that teacher view, I can scroll, and this could be me monitoring as students are working, thinking about who needs help, who doesn't, or what I want to go over, whose responses maybe I want to highlight. And so I could display this as well, and we could go through, and with that anonymous mode, no one has to be worried about, who's right, who's wrong. The other thing, if I have time, I can make use of the snapshot. So, we looked at all these tabs except snapshots. So what snapshots is you can see the little camera icons next to each response. So maybe there's a response I want to use and display and talk about. And so I click that camera icon, it says snapshot captured, and you'll see the little 1 here. Maybe there's another one I want to go over. Snapshot capture, there's a 2. And I'll just pick one more. Great. So I can, as students are working, if I've got the time, maybe start to sequence those slides that I want to go over. And then maybe when I pause them and we come back together, we can start saying, hey, look at these 2 responses. Like, do you agree with them? Do you disagree? Maybe we're going to compare and contrast the 2 responses. So there's lots of different things, but it allows us to collect, sequence, and display the student thinking for our conversations and our debrief as we go through. And we can go through and make multiple slides. We can add a question up here. You agree? Depending on kind of what we're looking at. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is, I'll go ahead and stop that pacing, but there was one other activity, and I linked both the larger activities that I pulled these from. But another activity I wanted to point out, because it's one of my favorites, is marble slides. So this is a linear one. They have all kinds of marble slides. They have parabolas, they have rational functions, exponential, sine, and cosine. But the whole idea here is that the students are going to change the equation so that that line helps guide those marbles to hit all the stars. So I've not hit all the stars, so I need to do some adjusting here with my slope and my y-intercept. And now when I launch, success, right? Those marbles fall, hit the line, and collect all the marbles that I need. Here I got to make my equation from scratch. There was one already populated in the other one. And great way to practice and apply what we know about slope and y-intercept with a purpose. And so it's really powerful. And again, that idea that there's a purpose here, there's a context, it's fun. Kids get into this, they cheer. I had teachers next door when I was doing the parabolas one had to come over and ask us to be quiet because kids were there were some really challenging ones and we had multiple lines and it was really fun. But also that idea that it's a lot of trial and error, right? Like, let me see, as I adjust this, what happens to the graph? As I change the equation here, what happens to the graph? So they're making those connections between the algebraic and the graphical representations. They're having fun with it. You can restrict domain, you can restrict range. So now it's not that the line has to go through all those stars. We just need to create something so that those marbles fall and at some point hit all those stars. So this is where you can get really creative. You have multiple lines coming, different pieces of the lines. Maybe they'll add in circles, they'll go above and beyond. But a student understanding of not only slope and y-intercept, but domain and range, this is really, really powerful stuff because there's a need to change the domain, right? There's a purpose to, let's restrict this domain for a purpose and a reason. And again, they get that quick feedback of, okay, what does less than 2 look like? What does less than 3 look like? 4, 5, and they make those connections and it really sticks visually for them. So that's another really cool activity that I wanted to share with you all there. So you've experienced it kind of from that student perspective. You saw a little bit of the teacher dashboard, and I really just want to emphasize what that dashboard supports. I'm familiar with the 5 practices. It's published by NCTM here, but as we're planning a lesson, we are anticipating what questions we're going to ask, student responses. So much of teaching is asking the right question at the right time, so we got to plan for that. Then it's about monitoring and listening and observing students, and that's where that dashboard comes in. You can see every single student's work and thinking on that dashboard. You can select those. You can sequence them using those snapshots, or maybe you just remain in that teacher view, as I mentioned. Maybe like this screen, I don't have time to always do the snapshots, but maybe we're starting to just display these and talk about them as a class as I scroll through and I pick out which ones I want to talk about. And through that, we're going to make connections, right? So we're going to connect, compare and contrast student work, right? Which parts of student work represent the original problem solution? All those things we can use from the dashboard. And really, those tools are designed with these 5 practices specifically in mind. So here's a few dashboards that I pulled, and the content necessarily isn't as important as the types of questions I'm asking and how I can utilize the dashboard to talk about student work. So this one I started with, again, a very informal question. What do you notice about this graph? What do you see? And it invites a lot of different responses. And I can display in this teacher view all the responses at once. I can scroll through and I can ask students, who do you agree with? Who do you disagree with? Who's right? Who's wrong? Maybe everyone's right. Are there any questions you have? I love talking about the word it when my students use it, right? It. Are we all talking about the same it, or is it a different it, right? So here, it doesn't have two solutions. We're talking about the function. But down here, it is on the x-axis. Are we talking about the entire function? No, we're talking about the vertex, right? So we can start to use that formal vocab. And what's cool about this is it shows it creates a need for that vocab, right? Like, we're not just going to start class with, here's what a vertex is. Like, well, how about we talk about this? And then all of a sudden it's like, wouldn't it be nice if we had a word that we could use where everyone, agreed and knew what we were talking about? Perfect. Let's use vertex, right? So you can kind of start with their informal language, move them towards the more formal language that you want them to use. Here's an example of the dashboard. Again, content not as important as what the dashboard can do here. It's grouping all the same exact responses together. So students had to type in this inequality, and I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students who all typed this exact same thing, y is greater than 1. And then 2 students who typed this, 2 students who typed this. And again, I invite that question of who's right, who's wrong. And I love that question when more than one student's right. And I love the idea of being able to talk about this, y is greater than 1, being equivalent to 1 is less than y. And there's something really, really powerful about that happening organically through student work and student thinking and student responses, instead of me saying, hey, everyone, these things are the same. We can write it like this, or we can write it like this, right? Because these are students' responses. They're looking up here. They're saying, okay, how many students said the same thing as me? I wonder if I'm right. I wonder if I'm wrong, right? So there's a lot more buy-in and attention being paid as you're going over this. This is a sketch. So I asked students to sketch a quadratic function that has x plus 8 as one of its factors. So I'm going to invite a lot of different responses. We didn't need to know the exact equation to produce it. They're just drawing it. And I can see the individual sketches. I might focus on one that's interesting to me, not just because of the picture, right? It's a cool, beautiful, cute sketch, but also because there's only one x-intercept. So now I can start maybe talking about that as a double root. Or I can talk about the equation being x plus 8 times x plus 8, or x plus 8 squared. So that informal picture and sketching, then start with that and then move towards the vocab, moving towards the equations and the stuff that really trips up students. Talk about it being upside down. Let them use that language first and talk about reflections, talk about what it means in the equation. One more thing with the sketch. So this was another sketch where they just had to plot 1 point. So they just sketched on the screen 1 point. And what I love is I can toggle back and forth on the dashboard where I can look at each individual sketch as I showed you here. Or I can do sketch overlay, one of my favorite features on the dashboard, where I can see everyone's sketch on top of it. So these darker points are where more than one student plotted a point. These lighter ones are just individual responses. And this is a question where I love this teacher move that I saw Marilyn Burns post about this on Twitter, about taking a wrong answer and trying to find what's the question that they answer. It's the right answer, just to a different question. And that's so much of what we can do as teachers is we can take students' incorrect answers and just start thinking about, okay, what question were they actually answering? So my teacher move on this screen is to take this point here and talk about it first and turn it back on the students. Okay, how do we change the question so that this is the correct answer? And it's really just changing one word, perpendicular to parallel, one word that starts with P, right? So a couple of things happen when doing this. One, this student probably doesn't feel as bad anymore. Some of their thinking is validated. They were wrong, but they weren't completely wrong, right? And the other thing is everyone is still thinking about the problem. There's so many times I have students who get things right and they're done. They're not listening to me, right? They're not listening to our discussion, but this pushes everyone's thinking forward as we're going over these problems because they're having to think, okay, how do I change the question now? Then we can move towards the other points and talk about and validate, okay, all these students at least knew that line that's perpendicular to the given line needed to have positive slope. But not everyone had that precise reciprocal, opposite reciprocal. So move through those incorrect answers till we get to those correct answers. So keep these things in mind when choosing an activity, right? Why do we want to use Desmos? Okay, why don't we just do what we've been doing, right? We've been effective, but we can really go to that next level if we think about how these tools in the dashboard are going to allow us to create some discourse, mathematical discourse around student thinking, and that's what it's about. All right, so building with Desmos, and really before we get into the building piece of it, we just want to be able to find some activities, set them up with the class code, and maybe copy and edit those that are made already. So what we're going to do is we're just going to head to teacher.desmos.com. And I'll pull up the agenda again here because from that last section, this is the student and teacher link to the activity that you all were in. And then as we move into building with Desmos or finding activities, there's a PDF here where you can open up and it has some featured activities by grade level and subject. And you can just click directly on the activity and it will take you to the activity homepage. So those are created by Desmos. Everything you'll find at teacher.desmos.com when you search is created by Desmos. They're very polished. You can also do just a general Google search. And then I also provided this teacher here, Jen. She has a whole spreadsheet full of activities by grade level. So those are not necessarily the Desmos ones, but I know her through the fellowship. She's got some really awesome activities that might be worth looking at as well. And then back at teacher.desmos.com, they have some featured collections. So you can see collections of different activities, again, based on subjects. And even though it's distance learning, those work great in the classroom as well. They just pulled those as we were all transitioning and going crazy. Last year with our distance learning, those were ones that worked particularly well, even with distance learning. And again, different topics there. So those are some pulled resources, ways to find some activities focused for you all. You can just do a general search at teacher.desmos.com by topic, so like linear, or by type of activity. So like marble slides, I mentioned all the different marble slides that are available. You could search for those. You could search for what are called card sorts, right? So there's some really cool card sorts that might just be a couple screens, but allow students to have to group together the different forms in this case, right? A lot less cutting, a lot less laminating than a paper card sort. So the links I gave you as resources, which is featured collections, but also just a general search. One thing I love in the featured collection, so I'll kind of go to that one, is inequality ones. And there's a nice progression of just, simple inequalities, compound inequalities, and then absolute value inequalities. So I click on an activity, and this is the activity homepage. And when I scroll to the bottom, a couple things you can see. You can see all the different class codes I've created. Some of these were just examples, but I use this activity quite a bit. I can preview it. So I click down here and I can just work through this activity as a student and start to feel if this is something I want to use. You'll notice those teacher moves pop up as I'm previewing it too, so I can get kind of a feel for not only the student perspective, but what I might be doing as the teacher, as well as some sample responses. So I preview it, I like it, I'm ready to assign to my class. So I can either set up classes students have already joined, and this will populate for them on their student.desmos.com homepage. Or I can just assign a single session code and share it to them as I did for you all today. So once it's created, that class code, I can hit dashboard, and now I'm to that screen that should look familiar from earlier. At the top, I can add these two collections. So I have different basically labels, and this is in several of not only the Desmos collections, but my collections that I've created. So an Algebra 2 collection, or if I went to that collection, I could see all the ones that I've collected and organized. And I like that you can tag them in multiple ones. And then the other thing is I can copy and edit this activity. So as you get into kind of building, I suggest use what's already out there, right? Don't spend all your time reinventing the wheel. Use what's out there, but maybe there's something out there that you just want to edit a little bit. So this takes me to the building screen, and I've got the different screens at the top. Kind of reminds me of the dashboard where you can see all the different screens. But as I click on them, I'm looking at the different components that have been put into that screen. And at any point I can hit preview and it will show me what the student sees. So I've got my activity. Maybe there's some vocabulary on a screen you want to change that Desmos use a little bit different than you use in your room. Maybe you want to, you're not going to have time for these last few screens. You're going to delete a screen, or maybe you want to add a screen just with a little note at the end. And you can also copy and paste from another activity. So this is a really useful way to save some time, I guess. So I'm going to go to one of my favorite collections, the starter screen. So these activities are not meant to be used in full. They are just individual screens that you might want to add to your activity. So again, it was from the home page, the starter screens here. And I'm going to do the screens for checking in. I'm going to go down to the preview. And these are just screens that maybe you want to start your activity with. So just how are you doing today? Check in with your students. So super helpful when we were not in person, still helpful be able to get in, check in with all my students every day and see what they might want to share with me. So if I want this in my activity, in the upper left-hand corner, I can do this with any screen in any activity. There's going to be this little icon as I'm previewing the activity, and I'm going to hit copy. I can go back to my activity. I'm going to put it at the beginning, and I'm going to hit, you can't see me pressing this, but Control V to paste. That screen pops in. I can reorder it. And now the beginning of my activity has that little check-in screen. They won't see the teacher moves. I'm just seeing it here from my perspective before they continue to move through the activity. All right, so again, deleting screens, adding screens, editing screens. I haven't really got into the components, but one last thing I'll show before I publish it is if I click up here, I can change the name. It defaulted to copy of, so maybe I've got my numbering. We're doing lesson 2.1. I'll hit save and publish. Now I have my own version. If I search for this, it will show up for teacher.desmos.com. It will not show up for anyone else at teacher.desmos.com. It's just for me. But I could then create my class code. I could add it to a collection, keep it organized. I'm ready to go. All right. So find the tab here. So as far as the resources go, I'm going to show you a little bit of building from scratch in just a second, but our time is going to be pretty limited for that. But that's why I've got all these links here. So this first group are just kind of general resources. The YouTube page is super helpful, and the user guide is super helpful as far as learning about the graphing calculator. Teaching with Desmos, this is, we talked about snapshots. You want to learn more about that, that's there. The different icons on the dashboard, maybe using that pausing, pacing, and anonymizing. So when you have the activity, what does teaching with it actually look like? And then building, what I'm going to do now, just to give you a little sneak peek, but these videos, these are short little clips that actually walk you step by step of, okay, how do I start my activity? How do I learn more about each component? How am I ready to create that class code and run the activity? So those should help you as you revisit this and start building on your own. But to build your own activity, we're at, again, teacher.desmos.com, where all the Desmos main activities are. But I'm going to go to custom activities on the left-hand side. These are ones I've edited or created myself. And I'm going to go ahead and add or click up here, new activity. So I'll give it a name and I'll create. And this screen should look familiar from when we were editing the earlier one. So I can go back up here if I wanted to change the name. And then over here are the different components I can add to a screen. So just to give you an idea of some of the components, there's your standard multiple choice and checkboxes. So checkboxes is where they could select more than one answer that's correct. I love those because you can quickly add graphs as a multiple choice. You could add math type really easily where you can't in other programs. Something that's a little bit different is maybe an ordered list. So again, the math type, if I want to have a fraction in here, I'm going to add another item, add another item, that to look nice as a formatted. And maybe I want students to order from smallest to largest. I can hit preview and they're able to maneuver those. And right now I don't have an answer key, so it's telling me this is what I would see for this student based on how they've interacted with the screen, just the dot that they've interacted. If I want there to be an answer key, I can click there. And I just need to make sure the correct order is set here as the answer key. So now it's giving me an X because they've interacted, but it's not correct. And now the dashboard will show this. They would not see this on their screen. This is what I would see on the dashboard. So it's giving you that kind of preview up there. Two more screens if I could get through kind of quick here, but the sketch. I mentioned the sketch. So when I add that sketch component, it can be blank, so students can sketch. It could be a graph, and we could keep that graph blank. So like when I had that parabola one, or you could have something on the graph. So we could put in here a parabola and they could sketch on top of it. Maybe they're finding the vertex, maybe they're showing where it's increasing, different things where they're sketching on top of it. You can also just add any image you have saved. This is from when I was doing the elementary, but you can imagine I use a lot of these images for like geometry problems that they might need to sketch on top of and show their thinking a little bit more. And they have a few options with these drawing tools as far as colors, thickness, and size. They can also type text or math type. It will help you kind of format fractions. So sketch is one I make use of a lot because again, I'm thinking about the dashboard, that sketch overlay. Maybe it's going to be graph aligned with positive slope. And then I can show all the lines that hopefully, are going up from left to right, or graph aligned with a y-intercept of 4. And so when I do that sketch overlay, maybe I have a bunch of different lines with students and they can see what's the same, what's different. It's really impactful visually when I'm using that dashboard. And then the last thing is a card sort. So this is, you can notice there's no other components now. This is a full screen activity. So when you're starting to build, my recommendation is keep it short, right? One, 2 screens, warm up, exit ticket. Card sorts are great ways, but we can add different types of cards, whether it's just text. Maybe we want it to be math type. So again, when I type in that / it's going to format it into a fraction for me, or an image. And so when students have this, they are going to group those cards together. I don't have an answer key, so it just is showing the dashboard that I have interacted with the screen, but I can set the answer key. Over here, it allows me to do that. So now it's showing that the student is wrong until they have every card correct in that group. And you have lots of flexibility. You could have as many groups as you want, as many cards as you want. You could have cards that are not connected or don't go in any groups as you're building that. So by no means all the components, but a good overview of what the building process starts to look like. I hit publish, I'm done, I'm ready to create a class code. I can save it in a collection, I'm all set. So learn more about each component. That link is really helpful since we didn't go through all of them, but it breaks down and gives you examples. and some pro tips of each of those. So you can see the sketch. You could go and view actual examples of it being used in the other components as well. So as we wrap up today, I will stick around if there's any last minute questions. I know pushing our time here right at 4:30, I want to be respectful of that, but the email support@desmos.com or my personal email, I think Beth will share again. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I love sharing about this. I love helping small questions, big questions, whatever it is. And same with the entire Desmos team. Don't be afraid. They're super responsive to your needs and helping you, and suggestions too. If you're like, hey, I wish the calculator did this, or I wish the activities did this. A lot of the things they add as features are actually coming from the teachers' ideas and requests. So they definitely track those and keep tabs on that and work towards getting those for you all in the classroom. So I'm going to throw it back over to Beth again, see if there's any questions that I need to answer, and she'll give you kind of that last minute information as we wrap up.
Yes, all right. Thank you, sir. This has been, yes, I want to be the presenter. Okay. This has been another great session today. I would like to echo what Nolan has said about the responsiveness of the Desmos team. They are amazing. Just hitting back over maybe some frequently asked questions. We are recording today's webinar. And tomorrow, hopefully you'll receive an email, and it will come from NC Public Schools just due to the number of emails that we need to send. And it will have the recording today, and it will also have all of the links that Nolan has shared. I'll make sure we put those in there. And it will also have his email and my email. We are not offering any CEUs for participation in the webinar today, and that's either tuning in live or watching after the fact. And contact information. So this will also be in your email. Nolan is who you should hit up if you have Desmos related questions. So questions related to the content of today's webinar. If you have any questions about testing in North Carolina, how we embed the calculators, questions about check-ins or NC interims or EOGs or EOCs, those are all appropriate for me, and there's my contact information. We are here to support. If you have questions, please do reach out. And with that, I'm going to say, I'm going to do one last look through the chat here. I'm going to tell you again, Nolan, the chat is flooded with folks expressing gratitude and excitement for the things that you have shared with us today. I don't see any outstanding questions. I think we got everything that I saw at least. And we're going to say thanks a bunch. Look for that email to come out tomorrow. And Nolan, anything else before we sign off?
No, just thank you all for joining. Enjoyed sharing with you, and hopefully you're inspired and have resources to continue to learn and grow.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, you too.